Hi, everybody. This is the Christian formation time for the adult class at Messiah Lutheran Church in Mechanicsville, Virginia. I'm Pastor Ryan Radke. I am off this coming Sunday, the 13th of November, but I thought I'd record the lesson for everybody, both those who watch online and for our class. They get to use this video, hi everybody, for their class today. There will be times during the video where you can just hit pause when we get to a discussion question. So whether you're at home or sitting around the table at church, uh, thanks for being here and enjoy this discussion. We are continuing on in the series we're in called Reading the Teacher's Guide, Luther's Large Catechism. So there's the Small Catechism, and some folks have that in print. I have an app which I've learned now is no longer being made. So to everybody who I kept saying, what a great app, you should get it over these last few months, apparently they don't do it anymore. There are some other apps out there, just not the one from our denomination's publishing house, Augsburg Fortress. But there are things out there. Just happens to be the translation that I'm a little bit more used to. A few weeks ago, so we've been going through the small catechism as we go through the large catechism, and they had there's the Ten Commandments, there's the Apostles' Creed, there's the Lord's Prayer, and then the sacraments, baptism and communion. Well, when we did the Ten Commandments, the first commandment, especially the extra little piece added onto it, took up our entire conversation. So for today, for this recorded one, I'm just going to do a quick run through the other commandments and have some place, as I mentioned, some places for folks to stop and discuss. And then next week on the 20th, we'll kind of do an overview of baptism and communion, a little bit of confession thrown in to go with baptism. But we'll just hit the highlights on that to round out the series before we begin the season of Advent of something new. So let's get right to it. We talked a lot about the first commandment, and what Luther said basically was, if you can follow this commandment, then all the rest come into line. So if you have no other God, if you fear, love, and trust God, then all these other things will happen. There's kind of two tables to the commandments. They're the ones that talk about your relationship with God. Those would be the first three in the Lutheran numbering. So you shall have no other gods, don't take the name of the Lord your God in vain, and honor the Sabbath day. And then 4 through 10 would be your kind of earthly interpersonal relationships, honoring your father and mother, and then all of the don'ts. Don't uh, murder, don't commit adultery, don't steal, don't bear false witness, don't covet. So that's all the rest. So we're starting today with the second commandment in the large catechism, but let's hear what it says in the small catechism first. You shall not make wrongful use of the name of the Lord your God is the commandment. What is this, or what does this mean? Luther asks. We are to fear and love God, and by the way, all but one of the other commandments all start with this, which is grounded in, all of the other commandments start with this, grounded in the first commandment. We are to fear and love God so that we do not curse, swear, practice magic, lie, or deceive using God's name, but instead use that very name in every time of need to call on, pray to, praise, and give thanks to God. Now that but instead is the one that every other commandment but one uses. It's always, here's what not to do, but instead do this. It's not like you just pat yourself on the back with the fifth commandment and say, hey, I didn't kill anybody today. Yay me. But instead, you protect people and, make sure they don't get hurt in any way. Um, so that's a pattern on Luther's explanations of the commandments. Don't do this, but instead do that. So with this one, don't take the name of the Lord your God in vain. I'm going to hit a couple passages from the Large Catechism to expand on what we just heard, and then ask a question and move on. Just as the first commandment instructs the heart and teaches faith, so this commandment leads us outward and directs the lips and tongue into a right relationship with God. For the first things that burst forth and emerge from the heart are words. As I have taught above how to answer the question of what it means to have a God, so you must learn to understand simply the meaning of this and all the other commandments and apply it to yourself. If you are asked, what does the second commandment mean, or what does it mean to take the name of God in vain or misuse it, you should answer briefly. It is a misuse of God's name if we call upon the Lord God in any way whatsoever to support falsehood or wrong of any kind. What this commandment forbids, therefore, is appealing to God's name falsely, or taking his name upon our lips when our heart knows, or should know, that the facts are otherwise. For example, when taking oaths in court, and one party lies about the other. God's name cannot be abused more flagrantly than when it is used to lie and deceive. Let this be the simplest and clearest explanation of this commandment. Another passage, see all of this as an attempt to deck yourself out with God's name or to put up a good front, to justify yourself with his name, whether in ordinary worldly affairs or in sophisticated and difficult matters of faith and doctrine. Let us learn and take to heart how much is at stake in this commandment, and diligently guard against and avoid every misuse of the holy name as the greatest sin that can be committed outwardly. Lying and deceiving are themselves great sins, but they become much more serious when we try to justify and confirm them by invoking God's name, and thus make it into a cloak to hide our shame. Thus one lie becomes two, indeed, a whole pack of lies. There's sort of a process of justification that goes along with using God's name. Like, no, I swear, no, you know, on, I swear to God, that kind of stuff, right? Um, Gotta read my own notes here. Here we go. 63. This is the numbers in my book. Okay. In addition, you must also know how to use the name of God properly. So not just what not to do. With the words, you are not to take the name of God in vain, God at the same time gives us to understand that we are to use his name properly, for it has been revealed and given to us precisely for our use and benefit. Okay. Jumping ahead again. Many a terrible and shocking calamity would befall us if God did not preserve us through our calling upon his name. I have tried it myself, and have indeed experienced that often a sudden great calamity was averted and vanished in the very moment I called upon God. To defy the devil, I say, we should always keep the holy name upon our lips, so that he may not be able to harm us as he would like to do. And one more. You're just watching me look at a page. Likewise, if someone unexpectedly... Oh, here we go. From the same source comes the custom learned in childhood of making the sign of the cross when something dreadful or frightening is seen or heard, and saying, Lord God, save me, or yeah, help, dear Lord Christ, and the like. Likewise, if someone unexpectedly experiences good fortune, no matter how insignificant, he or she may say, God be praised and thanked. God has bestowed this upon me, etc. Just as children used to be taught to fast and pray to St. Nicholas and other saints. But those practices would be more pleasing and acceptable to God than life in a monastery or Carthusian holiness. All throughout this, Luther keeps grinding his axe on monasteries and convents and his feelings on that. So, not just. So, again, I want to make a little distinction here. Luther was in a different time and culture, yes. However, if we think that if we just be like, oh, God help me, then calamity averts, that is not proven to be true in life. Calamity still happens sometimes. If something good happens, we're like, oh, God, thank you. I mean, you can still thank God for good things in your life, but it doesn't necessarily mean that God put that lucky penny there for you to pick up, right? But it does create, by always thanking God when something good happens, and always asking for God's help in the midst of calamity or trouble, that external action helps shape the internal heart. So he said at the beginning, whatever's in your heart comes out through your lips. So even if your heart isn't quite there, if you train your lips to always thank God and to always ask for God's help, then you're always looking for it. You're keeping God in the foreground in all your life. God is with you through the good and the bad, no matter what. The Spirit is there, guiding you, protecting you, comforting you. But when bad stuff or good stuff happens, you'll know that God is there if you kind of train yourself to do that. And then you don't have those moments of despair or forgetfulness on either end of the spectrum. Last one for Commandment 2. Yeah, here we are. With a simple and playful With simple and playful methods like this, we should bring up young people. Remember, all of this is directed to how do you teach the young people the basics of the faith. Um, we should bring up young people in the fear and honor of God so that the first and second commandments may become familiar and constantly be practiced. Then some good may take root, spring up, and bear fruit, and people may grow to adulthood who may give joy and pleasure to an entire country. It's okay, you invest now as they're young so that they grow up to be decent human beings as adults. That would also be the right way to bring up children, while they may be trained with kind and agreeable methods. That's where Luther maybe could have stopped from our sensibilities, but he keeps going. For what a person enforces by means of beatings and blows will come to no good end. At best, the children will remain good only as long as the rod is set on their backs. Very common, right? Luther's saying, yeah, that's not going to work so well in the long run, but he'd also at the same time kind of encourages a heavy hand on the kids throughout this. But that would be commandment 2, not to take the name of the Lord your God in vain. So my question for you to discuss is how to teach um okay, how do you teach this? How do you reinforce this? I want to hear, or I want you to share, and you can tell me later. I want to hear success stories. So what are some success stories in your life, whether as parents, grandparents, mentors, Sunday school teachers, what have you? What are some success stories on how to teach younger folks the importance of respecting and honoring God in all that they do, asking for God's help, thanking God when things go well? So, pause, discuss. We'll come back for Commandment 3. Okay, Commandment 3. The third commandment is remember the Sabbath day and keep it holy. And the small catechism, Luther says, what is this, or what does this mean? We are to fear and love God, there it is again, so that we do not despise preaching or God's word, but instead, keep that word holy and gladly hear and learn it. Okay. So, don't despise the word, but instead keep it holy. Honor, serve, obey, love, respect. That's the wrong word. But instead keep that word holy, gladly hear and learn. Okay. Third commandment. Sabbath properly means rest, Luther says. To cease from work, hence our common expression for stopping work, literally means taking a holiday. That's Luther playing with German, don't worry about it. In the Old Testament, God set apart the seventh day, appointed it for rest, and commanded it to be kept holy above all other days. Okay. As far as outward observance is concerned, the commandment was given to the Jews alone. This is part of Luther's understanding of the Old Testament, that most of the law and rules have been fulfilled by Christ, don't apply to Christians. But however, for outward reasons, and that a lot of the commandments are still good for us to follow, especially the Ten Commandments. Back to Luther's interpretation of how the Jews handled this commandment. They were to refrain from hard work and to rest so that both human beings and animals might be refreshed and not be exhausted by constant labor. Okay. In time, however, the Jews interpreted this commandment too narrowly and grossly misused it. They slandered Christ and would not permit him to do the very same things they themselves did on that day, as we read in the Gospel, as if the commandment should be fulfilled by refraining from work of any kind. This was not its intention, but rather, as we shall hear, it meant that we should sanctify the holy day or day of rest. Okay, so yes, did Jesus have some encounters with folks, healing on the Sabbath day, plucking grain on the Sabbath day, and he used those moments as teachable moments to say, well, if somebody's suffering, don't wait. If your animal falls unwell, if they need a drink, you're going to do that, right? So he was trying to get them back to the heart of the law. But remember who Jesus was talking to in those instances: synagogue leaders, Pharisees, scribes, chief priests, Sadducees, Pharisees, the leaders of the day. What Luther does is this sort of casual anti-Semitism that was, again, super common in that day and unfortunately still lingers very strongly as anti-Semitism is on the rise, spiking again lately. Just to paint the whole people with a broad brush is not fair, and it's actually really lazy scholarship. So did some Jewish folks, specifically in Jesus's encounters, interpret things that way? Sure. But to say that the entire people and religion handled it that way, that's denigrating, to say the least. And it builds a foundation for worse stuff down the line. Wanted to make sure I touched on that. Moving on. To give a Christian interpretation to the simple people of what God requires of us in this commandment, note that we do not observe holy days for the sake of intelligent and well-informed Christians. Come on, for they have no need of them. We observe them first because our bodies need them. Nature teaches and demands that the common people, manservants and maidservants who have gone about their work or trade all week long, should also retire for a day to rest and be refreshed. Okay. Second and most important, we observe them so that people will have time and opportunity on such days of rest, which otherwise would not be available, to attend worship services. That is, so that they may assemble to hear and discuss God's word and then to offer praise, song, and prayer to God. So we're working them into the ground 6 days a week, but we better give them a day off so that they do all their church work too. Doesn't sound good, but it was the time and the culture. Just be careful how you use it today. We are using it to understand the why of Luther's explanation. So if the Ten Commandments don't especially apply to Christians anymore, especially the Sabbath one, then what does it matter? What does it mean for us? So his first reason is to say, well, people need a break. Moving ahead a little bit, accordingly, when you are asked what you are to hallow the day of rest means, answer, hallowing the day of rest means to keep it holy. What is meant by keeping it holy? Nothing else than devoting it to holy words, holy works, and holy living. The day itself does not need to be made holy, for it was created holy, going back to the creation story. But God wants it to be holy for you. Okay? This should bring to mind our conversation last week with the Lord's Prayer. What God does is already done, but we're asking that it would be done in and through us as well, right? So it becomes holy or unholy on your account, depending on whether you spend it doing something holy or unholy. What's it Forrest Gump said? Stupid is as stupid does. Holy is as holy does. How does such sanctifying take place? Not when we sit behind the stove and refrain from hard work, or place a garland on our head and dress up in our best clothes, but, as has been said, when we make use of God's word and exercise ourselves in it. Note, then, that the power and force of this commandment consists not in the resting, but in the hallowing, so that this day may have its special holy function. Other work and business are really not designated holy activities unless the person doing them is first holy. So think vocations, that all you do is an opportunity to honor the Sabbath, to honor God, to live a holy life. Okay, just be intentional about it sometimes. In this case, however, a work must take place through which a person becomes holy. This work, as we have heard, takes place through God's word. So intentionally expose yourself to God's word so the sanctifying can happen. Places, times, persons, and the entire outward order of worship have therefore been instituted and appointed in order that God's word may exert its power publicly. Okay? At whatever time God's word is taught, preached, heard, read, or pondered, there the person, the day, and the work is hallowed, not on account of external work, but on account of the word that makes us all saints. Accordingly, I constantly repeat that all our life and work must be based on God's word if they are to be God-pleasing or holy. Where that happens, the commandment is in force and fulfilled. Okay, one more. And also know the context of Luther's time, especially in the Catholic Church of that time. Saints' days were like happening all the time. They were a big deal. All these extra things, there were relics, supposedly pieces of saints or other evangelists or even Jesus or the cross that would be revered and worshipped. And what Luther said was that it had all just become hollow ritual without any meaning, just going through the motions. So he said, be hallowed. If you want to honor the Sabbath day, then let that word get into you and let it sanctify you so that all you do is holy. Right? Different emphasis. It wasn't just showing up for the holy day and there, check mark. Luther said, no, that's hollow. One last one for this one. Therefore, you must constantly keep God's word in your heart, on your lips, and in your ears, which takes you to Deuteronomy 6. Remember, hear, O Israel, love the Lord your God with all your heart, soul, strength, mind. It's a short version. You must constantly keep God's word in your heart, on your lips, and in your ears. For where the heart stands idle and the word is not heard, the devil breaks in and does his damage before we realize it. And that is the third commandment. So, question for you all. Pick a day. Yesterday. Last Tuesday. Um, Veterans Day is the day I'm recording this. How is that day hallowed for you? In what ways did the Word encounter you? Did you invite the Word to encounter you? And in what ways is that sanctification coming back out so that you are honoring what God has made holy this day? Any day, not just the Sabbath. That's when we do it on purpose. But how was your day of choice hallowed for you and you through you? Discuss. I'm assuming you paused. I'm going to keep going. Fourth commandment, man, this one is long. Luther goes into a lot with this one. By far the longest, I think. The fourth commandment, honor your father and your mother. What is this, or what does this mean? We are to fear and love God, so that we neither despise nor anger our parents and others in authority, but instead honor, serve, obey, love, and respect them. Where do we want to start here? As I said, it's a long one. I'll try not to do too much. Let's start here. It is a much higher thing to honor than to love, he says. How God sets apart parents. Honor includes not only love, but also deference, humility, and modesty, directed, so to speak, toward a majesty concealed within them, parents. Honor requires us not only to address them affectionately and with high esteem, but above all to show by our actions, both of heart and body, that we respect them very highly, and that, next to God, we give them the very highest place. For anyone whom we are wholeheartedly to honor, we must truly regard as high and great. Okay? It must therefore be impressed on young people that they revere their parents as God's representatives, and to remember that, however lowly, poor, feeble, and eccentric they may be, they are still their mother and father given by God. No matter how lowly, poor, feeble, and eccentric they may be, they're still mother and father. It's a low bar. Some details of that. First, then, learn what this commandment requires concerning honor to parents. You are to esteem them above all things and to value them as the most precious treasure on earth. Okay? Second, in your words, you are also to behave respectfully toward them and are not to speak discourteously to them, to criticize them, or to take them to task. How's that working? But rather to submit to them and hold your tongue, even if they go too far. Okay, we'll come back to that. Third, you are also to honor them by your actions, that is, with your body and possessions, serving them, helping them, and caring for them when they are old, sick, feeble, or poor. All this you should do not only cheerfully, but also with humility and reverence, doing it as if for God. Those who know how they are to cherish their parents in their hearts will not let them endure want or hunger, but will place them above and beside themselves and share with them all they have to the best of their ability. So it's kind of like a covenant you never signed up for, but you're born into. You honor your parents and you take care of them as they're older, the whole 9 yards. It's a lifelong commitment, just like they're making to you by having having you. Now I want to go back to that, respect them even when they go too far. So as we've mentioned, Luther was very comfortable talking about beating children and, don't spare the rod and things like that. Nowadays we would be concerned about, abuse and things like that. There is a point where if a parent is abusive, uh, physically, emotionally, verbally, um, that the best way to honor them is to get out of that situation and put up better boundaries so that you're safe from the abuse and they're no longer able to abuse you. We need to add some nuance in here to protect the vulnerable and the innocent kids who are legally under their parents' protection. If the parents betray that, then there needs to be recourse. So yeah, how do we handle an abusive situation with regards to this commandment? I guess that was my discussion question for this one. Yeah, I'll finish my spiel, and then if you want to pause to talk about that, we can. Um, okay, moving ahead a little bit. So what Luther does is he blames pretty much all of society's ills on a lack of this honor for parents and others in authority. Okay, so he says, why do we have so many scoundrels who must daily be hanged, beheaded, or broken on the wheel, if not because of disobedience? They will not allow themselves to be brought up in kindness. Consequently, because of God's punishment, they bring upon themselves the misfortune and grief that is seen in their lives. For it seldom happens that such wicked people die a natural and timely death. Okay. Um, Later on, he says some more. We certainly feel our misfortune, and we grumble and complain about unfaithfulness, violence, and injustice, but we are unwilling to see that we ourselves are scoundrels who have rightly deserved punishment and are in no way better because of it. Okay, so it's not just those people, it's everybody. So well, there's that. Everybody sins and falls short. Falls short. That's part of society's ills as a general lack of obedience. Luther goes on, I say all this so that it may be thoroughly impressed upon the young people, for no one believes how necessary this commandment is, especially since, up until now, under the papacy, it was neither heeded nor taught. These are plain and simple words, and everyone thinks that he or she already knows them well. So they pass over them lightly, fasten their attention on other things, and fail to perceive and believe how angry they make God when they neglect this commandment, and how precious and acceptable a work they may perform when they observe it. Okay, we do get a little bit of balance here, not as much as I would like. Furthermore, in connection with this commandment, we must mention the sort of obedience due to superiors, persons whose duty it is to command and to govern. For all other authority is derived and developed out of the authority of parents. Where a father is unable by himself to bring up his child, he calls upon a schoolmaster to teach him. If he is too weak, he seeks the help of his friends and neighbors. If he dies, he confers and delegates his responsibility and authority to others appointed for the purpose. In addition, he has to have servants, manservants and maidservants under him in order to maintain the household, manage the household. Thus all who are called masters stand in the place of parents and must derive from them their power and authority to govern. They are all called fathers in the Scriptures because in their sphere of authority they have been commissioned as fathers and ought to have fatherly hearts toward their people. Thus, from ancient times, the Romans and people speaking other languages called the masters and mistresses of the household patres et matres familias. Think of, oh brother, where art thou? I'm the paterfamilias, right? Um, that is house fathers and house mothers. Again, their princes and overlords were called patres patriae, country fathers, to the great shame of us would-be Christians who do not speak of our rulers in the same way, or at least do not treat and honor them as such. Okay, so it expands to cover all these other types of authority figures. Here's the balance I was looking for. Wrong section. Here we go. More than enough has now been said to all those to whom this commandment applies. In addition, it would also be well to preach to parents on the nature of their responsibility, how they should treat those whom they have been appointed to rule. Although their responsibility is not explicitly presented in the Ten Commandments, it is certainly treated in detail in many other passages of Scripture. God even intends it to be included precisely in this commandment, in which he speaks of father and mother, for he does not want scoundrels or tyrants in this office or authority, nor does he assign them this honor, that is, power and right to govern, so that they may receive homage. Instead, they should keep in mind that they owe obedience to God, and that, above all, they should earnestly and faithfully discharge the duties of their office, not only to provide for the material support of their children, servants, subjects, etc., but especially to bring them up to the praise and honor of God. Therefore, do not imagine that the parental office is a matter of your pleasure and whim. Okay? It is a strict commandment and injunction of God who holds you accountable for it. But once again, the real trouble is that no one perceives or pays attention to this. Okay, so the real problem is people not doing it. So there's a little bit of admonishment to those in authority, but at least in Luther's explanation, most of the onus falls on the obeyers. So that brings me back to the question on this one. Very clear that Luther sees in Scripture this hierarchy, and that the authority that earthly folks have as parents, I'll expand it from just the fathers, parents, um, authority figures, those in government, um, whether it's the country or the local level or in between. Um, if you're a boss, if you're a manager, um, that you have these roles of responsibility, and that folks owe them obedience. And he touches on a little bit, but the question I'd like you to discuss is, so what about if it's an abusive situation? What if they are acting like, what was it? Scoundrels or tyrants in the office of authority. How do you handle that then? So, pause, discuss. Moving on. The fifth commandment. You shall not murder. Short and sweet. What is this? What does this mean? Less short. We are to fear and love God. That's how they all start. So that we neither endanger nor harm the lives of our neighbors. Okay, not just killing, neither endanger nor harm the lives of our neighbors, but instead help and support them in all life's needs. Okay, so this commandment is easy enough to understand, and it often has been treated because we hear Matthew 5 every year as a gospel lesson where Christ himself explains and summarizes it. We must not kill either by hand, heart, or word, by signs or gestures, or by aiding and abetting. It forbids anger, except, as we have said, to persons who function in God's stead, that is, parents and governing authorities. So anger, reproof, and punishment are the prerogatives of God and his representatives, and are to be meted out to those who transgress this and the other commandments. Okay. He actually goes on to say, um, God has delegated his authority, here we go, yeah, to punish evildoers to the civil authorities in the parent's place. Um, Therefore, what is forbidden here applies to individuals, not to government officials. So basically what he's saying is capital punishment, the death penalty, that's okay, as long as it's handled by the authorities. I will say that the ELCA, you may know, puts out social statements on various social issues. Many of them, most of them, all of them are very in-depth and look at each complicated issue from many perspectives. Scripture brings to bear. Um, Many of them end up feeling maybe a little less decisive than you would want. And we're looking at this from all sides. Here's what we know. Work it out prayerfully in community. But when it came to the death penalty, the ELCA came down very definitively. They're against it, no matter what. Um, there's just no, it's not our place to do, they said. So that our modern expression of Lutheranism would disagree with Luther on that one. Okay, but the occasion and need for this commandment is that, as God well knows, the world is evil and this life is full of misery. Therefore he has erected this and the other commandments to separate good and evil. Just as there are many attacks against all the commandments, so here too we must live among many people who do us harm, and thus we have reason to be their enemy. Okay? So you might have murder in your heart, even a little bit. Nasty stuff in your heart towards others, in your mind, on your lips. And that is cautioned against and forbidden in Scripture by Jesus. Don't do that. And Luther is repeating that. The meaning of this commandment, then, is that no one should harm another person for any evil deed, no matter how much that person deserves it. So Luther doesn't dispute that some people deserve it, but he says don't actually do it. For wherever murder is forbidden, there also is forbidden everything that may lead to murder, he says. Many people, although they do not actually commit murder, nevertheless curse others and wish such frightful things on them that, if they were to come true, they would soon put an end to them. Since we just wrapped up an election, I'm gonna throw that one out there just for politics in general. Man, is it easy to just say horrible things about the other side, certain individuals. And this will come up again with the eighth commandment, not to bear false witness, not to slander or malign people, but because that is a form of murder. You're murdering their reputation. You're delivering cuts with words, written or spoken, or in your heart. That's a hard one. But special caution. I know we like to joke around and those, that side of the political aisle, they're the problem, or blah blah blah. But just caution you. It's very easy to do and to let it metastasize. A couple more from this one. We'll keep this one short. Excuse me. In the second place, this commandment is violated not only when we do evil, but also when we have the opportunity to do good to our neighbors and to prevent, protect, and save them from suffering bodily harm or injury, but fail to do so. It's kind of a good Samaritan law here. If you send a naked person away when you could clothe them, you have let them freeze to death. If you see anyone who is suffering from hunger and do not feed her, you have let her starve. Likewise, if you see anyone who is condemned to death or in similar peril and do not save him, although you have means and ways to do so, you have killed them. It will be of no help for you to use the excuse that you did not assist their deaths by word or deed, for you have withheld your love from them and robbed them of the kindness by means of which their lives might have been saved. I think that's a biggie, right? Therefore, God rightly calls all persons murderers who do not offer counsel or assistance to those in need and peril of body and life. He will pass a most terrible sentence upon them at the last day. As Christ himself declares, this is from Matthew 25, he will say, I was hungry and you gave me no food. I was thirsty and you gave me nothing to drink. I was a stranger and you did not welcome me, naked and you did not give me clothing, sick and in prison and you did not visit me. That is to say, you would have permitted me and my family to die of hunger, thirst, and cold, to be torn to pieces by wild beasts, to rot in prison, or perish from want. One last one. Martin Luther says, this kindness, as I said, is directed especially toward our enemies. For doing good to our friends is nothing but an ordinary virtue of pagans, as Christ says in Matthew 5. So my question here, I think the first half of the explanation, what not to do, is pretty clear, even expanded. So don't kill people literally, but also don't hurt them. Don't, hurt them with your words, your actions, your deeds, anything. Okay? But my question for you right now is, what are some concrete ways to live out this instead? To instead protect and preserve, especially towards enemies, that you are as good as a murderer if you see somebody who's in need and you don't help them. So what are some concrete ways to live out this instead? Discuss. All right, moving on. Now we have the sixth commandment, you shall not commit adultery. What is this, or what does this mean? We are to fear and love God so that we lead pure and decent lives in word and deed, and each of us loves and honors his or her spouse. Okay? Fear and love God, again, so that we lead pure and decent lives in word and deed. Each of us loves and honors his or her spouse. This is the only one that doesn't have a but instead. It's kind of implied, but it's not spelled out the same way. Here's a little summary of this one. But inasmuch as there is such a shameless mess and cesspool of all sorts of immorality and indecency among us, this commandment is also directed against every form of unchastity, no matter what it is called. Not only is the outward act forbidden, but also every kind of cause, provocation, and means, so that your heart, your lips, and your entire body may be chaste, and afford no occasion, aid, or encouragement to unchastity. Not only that, but you are to defend, protect, and rescue your neighbors wherever they are in danger or need, and moreover even aid and assist them so that they may retain their honor. Whenever you fail to do this, although you could prevent a wrong, or do not even lift a finger, as if it were none of your business, still going here? Yeah. You are just as guilty as the culprit who commits the act. In short, all are required both to live chastely themselves and also to help their neighbors do the same. Thus, God wants to guard and protect every husband or wife through this commandment against anyone who would violate them. I think the tricky part here is who decides what is chaste. Jesus talked about when they were eating at the table with some Pharisees and others, you know, how the disciples didn't wash their hands before they ate, which was part of the ritual. And Jesus says it's not what goes into your body that defiles, but what comes out. So don't worry so much about the external. Don't worry so much about other people and what they're doing, uh, as so much as what's in your heart. So we could get into big discussions. Maybe it's a good thing this is a recording and not around the table about school dress codes or pornography or just sexualization of clothes for kids or you know, how many movies have you watched where the camera does certain things and zooms in on certain parts of individuals, and how much does that train you from a young age that you should zoom into those? Like, you could do all this stuff, media. So there is all of that out there, and that's worthy of talking about. And what does that mean in terms of, is that a place where you should lift a finger? But how much of it really is just inside your own self and your self-control? That would be a big conversation, and y'all can talk about that on your own. That's not my discussion question for you today, though. Um, I want you to also think of uh, the fourth commandment. You know that parents are blessed by God, so they need to take that authority seriously. Luther says the same thing about marriage, which was forbidden for any priests, monks, nuns, and things like that. Part of the Reformation was that he got married. You know, Katie Luther was a former nun herself, and that Luther having a family, having a marriage, and having kids, not saying it's the only way to serve God, by no means. Not everybody has kids, wants kids. Don't hear it that way. But for him, it opened up a lot in terms of that vocation for him. What does that mean? It changed his perspective on things. He had a kid who died, I think. Oh, now I said it out loud. I know there was a very serious illness with some kids. I believe one of his children died. That changed his perspective on things. So he said marriage is good. It's blessed by God. In a way, in a different part, he basically says that it's a place to put your urges, right? So, you know, lock that in. Um, he said he had a lot of commentary on papal marriage ordinances and how that was dumb that the Pope would do those things. He said vows of chastity among the clerical folks are contrary to human nature. They're not noble. He said they're rather stupid, so he had a lot to say on that. My discussion question for you is, okay, how if we think marriage is so great for those who want it, we think marriage is so great, and nowadays not everybody feels like marriage is needed. So here's the distinction. If somebody just doesn't want to get married, like they don't want to be in a relationship, that's fine. Don't ask them when they're going to get up together with somebody and have kids. Don't put that pressure on them. They might just not want to. Just listen to them. All right. It's a world designed for couples things, so single people sometimes have it rough, because that's all around them all the time. So don't add to that. That's but for those who want to be married and who are married, um, sorry, those who want to be in a relationship and want to be together with somebody but don't necessarily want to get married. So Christians are like, no, marriage is good. Some even call it a sacrament. Let's get married. Let's get married in church, right? Bring God into this relationship. So how do you promote the value of marriage without coming across as, well, just because you're supposed to, okay? So what? That's not going to convince anybody. So if we're in this commandment commanded to help with these types of vows, and to, what does it say? To help others honor these commitments. So what's so great about it? I don't know. Or you might discuss the other thing I brought up. That was a can of worms, to say the least. So take a pause, discuss, save time for the others. We got 3 left. Okay. All right, pause. Discuss. All right, moving on. Seventh commandment. You shall not steal. What is this? What does this mean? We are to fear and love God so that we neither take our neighbor's money or property, nor acquire them by using shoddy merchandise or crooked deals, but instead help them to improve and protect their property and income. Okay. So, seventh commandment here. Turning the page. To steal is nothing else than to acquire someone else's property by unjust means. And there's a variety of ways you can do that. These few words include taking advantage of our neighbors in any sort of dealings that result in loss to them. Stealing is a widespread common vice, but people pay so little attention to it that the matter is entirely out of hand. As a result, if we were to hang every thief on the gallows, especially those who do not admit it, the world would soon be empty and there would be a shortage of both hangmen and gallows. Oh, Martin. For, as I just said, stealing is not just robbing someone's safe or pocketbook, but also taking advantage of someone in the market, in all stores, butcher shops, wine and beer cellars, workshops, and, in short, wherever business is transacted and money is exchanged for goods or services. Okay, so it's not just that you mugged somebody or pickpocketed or broke into their house and stole stuff. It's all the shady business practices too. Okay. Um, he's got this bit on how, there's so many, there's servants who steal from you or don't work. There's artisans who overcharge. There's business people who cheat you. Okay, he gives some examples. It makes you wonder how Luther fared in the markets sometimes. He said, this is why people are called armchair bandits and highway robbers. Far from being picklocks and sneak thieves who pilfer the cash box, they sit in their chairs and are known as great lords and honorable, upstanding citizens, while they rob and steal under the cloak of legality. Yes, we might keep well quiet here about individual petty thieves, since we ought to be attacking the great, powerful arch-thieves with whom lords and princes consort, and who daily plunder not just a city or two, but all of Germany. There's a fun footnote here. That line, arch-thieves with whom lords and princes consort, was in the original publication of the Large Catechism, then got taken out for the next couple, and then got added back in. Made some people uncomfortable, apparently, to lump in the lords and princes who consorted with arch-thieves. Like, maybe we don't want to incur their wrath, but it made it back in, so that's good. Um, Instead, let all people know then that it is their duty, on pain of God's displeasure, not to harm their neighbors, to take advantage of them, or to defraud them by any faithless or underhanded business transaction. Much more than that, they are also obligated faithfully to protect their neighbors' property and to promote and further their interests, especially when they get money, wages, and provisions for doing so. Okay. Here's another. Anyone who is willing to learn should know that this is God's commandment and that he does not want it to be considered a joke. We will put up with those of you who despise, defraud, steal, and rob us. We will endure your arrogance and show forgiveness and mercy, as the Lord's Prayer teaches us. The upright, meanwhile, will have enough, and you will hurt yourself more than anyone else. But beware of how you deal with the poor. There are many of them now, who must live from hand to mouth. If you act as if everyone has to live by your favor, if you skin and scrape them right down to the bone, if you arrogantly turn away those who need your aid, they will go away wretched and dejected, and because they can complain to no one else, they will cry out to heaven. Beware of this, I repeat, as if it were the devil himself. Such sighs and cries are no laughing matter, but will have an effect too great for you and all the world to bear. For they will reach God, who watches over poor, troubled hearts, and he will not leave them unavenged. But if you despise and defy this, see whom you have brought upon yourself. If you succeed and prosper, however, you may call God and me liars before the whole world. But basically, you'll still get yours in the end, Luther says. So, real quick discussion on this one. What are some modern day examples of this? Luther especially singles out when people defraud the poor, make their situation even worse than it already is. So, modern day examples of this, discuss, go. All right, moving on. The eighth commandment, you shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. What is this, or what does this mean? We are to fear and love God so that we do not tell lies about our neighbors, betray or slander them, or destroy their reputations. That's a lot. Instead, we are to come to their defense, speak well of them, and interpret everything they do in the best possible light. So we have a shorthand in our house. We say, oh, we better eighth commandment this. Somebody's bugging us, something happened. We will try to stop. We do try to stop and interpret other people's actions in the best possible light. Interpret everything they do that way, speak well of them, come to their defense. We try. We don't always succeed, but we try. But that has become a shorthand for us. Yeah, man, I think we need to eighth commandment this if we catch ourselves. Here's what Luther says in the Large Catechism. Besides our own body, our spouse, and our temporal property, so Commandments 5, 6, 7, we have one more treasure that is indispensable to us, namely, our honor and good reputation. For it is important that we do not live among people in public disgrace and dishonor. Therefore, God does not want our neighbors deprived of their reputation, honor, and character any more than of their money and possessions. He wants everyone to maintain self-respect before spouse, child, servant, and neighbor. Okay? So, reputation is among the treasures. The first application of this commandment, then, is that all people should help their neighbors maintain their legal rights. One must not allow these rights to be thwarted or distorted, but should promote and resolutely guard them, whether this person is judge or witness, no matter what the consequences may be. So in a legal setting. So literally when you're acting as a witness, do not bear false witness. Okay? So this also applies to spiritual matters, slander, to gossip. There's a very great difference between judging sin and having knowledge of sin. You may certainly know about a sin, but you should not judge it. I may certainly see and hear that my neighbor sins, but I have no command to tell others about it. If I were to interfere and pass judgment on him, I would fall into a sin greater than that of my neighbor. When you become aware of a sin, however, do nothing but turn your ears into a tomb and bury it until you are appointed a judge and are authorized to administer punishment by virtue of your office. Now he goes on to explain that, again, if it has to do with the other commandments, stealing, murdering, things like that, then yes, speak up, do something, protect. But if you're just like, oh, I just saw what that person did over there. Oh, wait until I tell Mildred, don't do that. It's not your job to judge, and it's definitely not your job to spread that sin around unless, of course, it is causing harm. And even then, you approach the proper authorities, not just gossip. It's really, man, social media has made all of that really easier too. Just not social media, but texting. Like, it's just so easy to, like, put it out there without proof. I mean, look how many people's lives are ruined or reputations ruined because of stuff like that. On school, people can make stuff up online and other folks believe it, and all of a sudden somebody's destroyed, and you end up with all sorts of other problems and even suicide, things like that. So this eighth commandment one is a big deal, especially now, because it's almost more weaponized than it ever has been before. Those who are not content just to know, but rush ahead and judge, are called backbiters. Learning a bit of gossip about someone else, they spread it into every corner, relishing and delighting in the chance to stir up someone else's dirt, like pigs that roll in manure and root around in it with their snouts. This is nothing else than usurping God's judgment and office and pronouncing the severest kind of verdict or sentence, for the harshest verdict a judge can pronounce is to declare someone a thief, a murderer, a traitor, etc. This would also then be breaking the first commandment, making yourself do something that is God's role to do. Therefore, those who venture to accuse their neighbor of such guilt assume as much authority as the emperor and all rulers. For though you do not wield the sword, you use your venomous tongue to bring disgrace and harm upon your neighbors. He talks about Matthew 18 a little later that says, if your brother sins against you, go and tell him his fault between you and him alone, and then if that doesn't work, you bring some more people. If that doesn't work, you bring it before the whole assembly. Here you have a fine, precious precept for governing the tongue that ought to be noted carefully in order to avoid this detestable abuse. Let this be your rule, then, that you should not be quick to spread slander and gossip about your neighbors, but admonish them privately so that they may improve. Likewise, do the same when others tell you what this or that person has done. Instruct them, if they saw the wrongdoing, to go and reprove the individual personally, or otherwise to hold your tongue. So be careful with this one too. How you do it. Don't just go up to somebody and be like, you know, I saw you adding more leaves to your garbage than the rules. I don't know. There's leaves outside. Be careful that you don't come across as holier than thou or just nothing but judgmental. This is tricky. Um, okay. Question. And I will say, if you have a large catechism yourself, if you read through this one, sometimes it's just more simple to have the small catechism. Because sometimes what you get with the large catechism is a whole bunch of stuff that is very specific to the cultural context of when this was written. So all the stuff about monks and nuns and the Pope and all those things. Sometimes it can just be more distracting. Other times, and we'll see this in the last one, which covers the ninth and 10th commandments, having that context of the day is better than what you just get from the small catechism. It's good. So the question for Commandment 8. I'm going to turn to Harry Potter for this one. Albus Dumbledore said something along the lines of, it is time to choose between what is right and what is easy. Okay? Not right and wrong, but right and easy. I think that especially applies to the eighth commandment, to interpreting other people's actions in the best possible light. That is not easy. So much easier just to slander and write them off and gossip about it. So, my question for you is, how do you, eighth commandment things, how do you do this work? Um, how do you do what is right in this vein instead of what is just easy? Pause and discuss. All right, last section. The eighth and ninth commandment, or sorry, the ninth and 10th commandments. These are both coveting ones, so we'll go through both. The ninth commandment, you shall not covet your neighbor's house. What is this? What does this mean? We are to fear and love God so that we do not try to trick our neighbors out of their inheritance or property or try to get it for ourselves by claiming to have a legal right to it and the like, but instead, be of help and service to them in keeping what is theirs. The 10th commandment, you shall not covet your neighbor's wife or male or female slave or ox or donkey or anything that belongs to your neighbor. Notice husband got left out of that list. What is this? What does this mean? We are to fear and love God so that we do not entice, force, or steal away from our neighbors their spouses, household workers, or livestock, but instead urge them to stay and fulfill their responsibilities to our neighbors. Wives were seen as more transferable. Okay, so coveting. This is actually, I think, my favorite part of the large catechism. This one helped me understand coveting much better than I ever had in other places. In a way, these are more casual forms of the stealing and the killing and the murdering. It's more internal, more tricky, more sneaky. Okay, so here's some summary. I say they interpreted these commandments correctly to forbid anyone. I lost my spot. To forbid anyone, even with an apparently good pretense and excuse, to harm a neighbor by intending or scheming to take away anything that belongs to this neighbor, such as spouse, servants, house and farm, fields, meadows, or cattle. Above, the seventh commandment prohibits seizing or withholding someone else's possessions to which you have no right. But here it is also forbidden to entice anything away from your neighbor, even though in the eyes of the world you could do it honorably without accusation or blame for fraudulent gain. So coveting kind of covers the loopholes, the gray areas that you might want to exploit or even create. A little bit more summary. However these things may happen, we must learn that God does not want you to deprive your neighbors of anything that is theirs, so that they suffer loss while you satisfy your greed, even though before the world you can retain the property with honor. To do so is underhanded and malicious wickedness, and, as we say, it is all done under the table, so as to escape detection. Although you may act as if you have wronged no one, you have certainly trespassed on your neighbor's rights. It might not be called stealing or cheating, but it is coveting, that is, having designs on your neighbor's property luring it away from them against their will, and begrudging what God gave them. Okay? I think that makes coveting a little more realistic or fully formed in my mind. Such is nature, that no one wants someone else to have as much as he or she does. Everyone tries to accumulate as much as he or she can, and lets others look out for themselves. Yet, we all consider ourselves upright people, and put up a fine front to conceal our villainy. We hunt for and think up clever tricks and shrewd tactics. Better and better ones are being devised daily, under the guise of justice. We brazenly dare to boast of it, and defiantly insist that it should not be called rascality, it's a good one, but shrewdness and foresight. Makes me think of the stock market a little bit. All those machines, all those computers doing microsecond trades, telling people, no, no, you should play the market too. You have a legitimate chance. In this, we are abetted by jurists and lawyers who twist and stretch the law to suit their purpose, straining words and using them for pretexts, without regard for equity or for our neighbor's plight. In short, whoever is sharpest and shrewdest in such matters gets most advantage out of the law, for as the saying has it, the law favors the vigilant. This last commandment, therefore, is not addressed to those whom the world considers wicked rogues, but precisely to the most upright, to people who wish to be commended as honest and virtuous, because they have not offended against the preceding commandments. And then he goes on to basically rip the Jews some more, which isn't helpful, so we're not going to read that. This feels like a white-collar commandment, right? The ones with the means to get away with it, who can, on paper, in the public eye, well, I didn't do anything wrong, but who use what they already have to get more, and game the system. There's some roots to this. This then is the common meaning of this commandment. First we are commanded not to desire to harm our neighbors, nor to assist in doing harm, nor to give occasion for it. Instead, we are gladly to let them have what is theirs, and to promote and protect whatever may be profitable and serviceable to them, just as we wish others would do for us. Golden rule. So these commandments are aimed directly against envy and miserable covetousness, so that God may remove the root and cause from which arise all injuries to our neighbors. Therefore he sets it forth in plain words, you shall not covet, etc. Above all, he wants the heart to be pure, even though as long as we live, we cannot accomplish that. So this commandment remains, like all the rest, one that constantly accuses us and shows us just how upright we really are in God's sight. Okay. Is that anything else here? Oh. This occurs most often in lawsuits in which someone sets out to gain and squeeze something out of a neighbor. For example, when people wrangle and wrestle over a large inheritance, real estate, etc., they resort to anything that has the appearance of legality, so varnishing and garnishing it that the law must support them, and they gain such a title to the property that no one can raise an objection or initiate legal action. The same thing also happens in ordinary business dealings, where people cunningly filch something out of another's hand, so that the victim is helpless to prevent it, or seeing an opportunity for profit, perhaps where a person, because of adversity or debt, cannot hold on to property nor sell it without a loss. They hustle and harass the person until they get it for half price or less. And yet, this is not to be considered as something acquired or obtained illegally, but rather as legitimately purchased. Hence the sayings, first come, first served, or take care of yourself, and let the others take what they can. This one seems mighty relevant to me. I think a lot of people still do that today. So my question with this one, yeah, how do we apply this commandment today? Have we kind of lost sight of this one? Has it been reduced to just, oh, don't be envious or jealous, don't covet some, that doesn't belong to you, don't worry about that. To me, this adds a whole other dimension to it. The basically taking advantage of somebody, but without technically breaking the rules. So, how do we apply that one today? If you want to pause and discuss, please do. And then one last little bit. The conclusion. I'm just going to read one passage from the conclusion. This gets into a lot of what we talked about the other week with the commandments of the punishment to the third and fourth generation and the blessing to others. Okay, this is where he addresses some of that. Uh, it seems to me that we shall have our hands full to keep these commandments, practicing gentleness, patience, love towards enemies, chastity, kindness, etc., and all that is involved in doing so. But such works are not important or impressive in the eyes of the world. They are not uncommon and showy, reserved to certain special times, places, rites, and ceremonies, but are common, everyday domestic duties of one neighbor to another, with nothing glamorous about them. Those other deeds captivate all eyes and ears. He's talking about some of the stuff that the church of the day would do, festivals and saints' days and certain spiritual practices, penances. Um, Aided by great splendor, expense, and magnificent buildings, they are so adorned that everything gleams and glitters. There is burning of incense, singing and ringing of bells, lighting of candles and tapers, until for all of this nothing else can be seen or heard. Okay. But I want to come back to this. These aren't flashy following these commandments. These are, where is it? Common, everyday domestic duties of one neighbor to another. So, Luther talked a lot about vocation. Your vocation as a spouse, a parent, a citizen, a neighbor. That these are where you live out um, your spiritual gifts, your God-given callings, your justice, and you can take your actual neighbors or expand it to all neighbors, especially the vulnerable. Um, the last question to discuss is, how do you live this out in normal, neighborly ways? So maybe that's your homework. That can be your homework. Take that one with you. I have a feeling this is a long one because it's just a lot on the commandments because this is the everyday living out of faith and your ethics and your justice. That's why Luther spends so much time on it. That's why I think when I have taught these with kids before, these are the ones that make the most sense to them because they're concrete everyday stuff. As we've already seen, you go to the creed to say, where does this come from? And the Lord's Prayer, like the prayer that you get the support for, from God on how to do this, how to live this out. But there's a reason why Luther put the commandments first and why they get so much time. So thanks for watching, whether in the classroom or at home. Uh, God's blessings on the discussions you have had and the continuing pondering and discussions you will have from this. And as I said, next time we will wrap up the large catechism with some selected highlights on the sacraments. Take care, everybody, and we'll see you next time.